I'm Selena Brilla, and this is DIY Live, Huntsville, Alabama's YouTube channel dedicated to capturing the underground. And we are here at the Fret Shop today with Mr. Mike Slaten.
Hello.
We have so much to talk about, Mike. You have a whole bunch of projects. Let's talk about that first. You play on your own, then you play in a duo. And what do you call the duo?
The duo's Locos.
The duo's Locos. And then you play in Trace Locos. Getcha. Duo's Locos, Trace Locos. And then you also have Forest Haven.
Yep.
Want to tell us a little bit about each one of those projects?
Solo, it's I use a loop pedal. I do a lot of instrumental stuff. Weird, just acoustic, instrumental, loopy stuff. Jazz, blues, a little mixture of all that stuff. The duo is mostly acoustic blues. A lot of it's the stuff we do with Trace Locos, just acoustically stripped down. And then Trace Locos is blues rock, and Forest Haven is some type of metal.
Right, it is definitely what I call old man metal.
Old man metal.
Old man metal,
Yeah.
because it's like Iron Maiden-y, like old.
It's got an old sound, but
Yes.
we throw a little bit of the modern flavor into it, I think.
Great. So you play guitar, and when did you start playing guitar?
29 years ago?
That would have made you how old?
12.
12. Let's say you don't have to say if you don't want to, but
Okay.
I always like to say. It's 29 years playing guitar.
Yep.
Do you feel like you're a master expert at it? Good. I don't think we should ever feel like master experts of anything. What was your very first band you were ever in?
The Black Cheese.
The Black Cheese. How old were you?
I was 12.
You were 12.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I didn't know how to play my instrument, and so I got a friend of mine that didn't know how to play an instrument either, and I had a Casio keyboard. It was about that big, and he just made noise on it. And then we recruited a guitar player that could play a little bit better than me, obviously. And then we got another guy that was friends with the keyboard player that played an upright bass.
Nice.
And we jammed in my parents' garage 2 or 3 times, and it was pretty awful.
This is most first bands usually
But
are.
it was memorable because I still remember it almost
Yeah.
30 years later.
The Black Cheese. So that was your very first band ever. So then were you in bands like throughout high school and so on? What were those years of your life like?
Yep. So then after that was when I was in South Texas, and then I moved up to Montgomery, and then I started a band called, the drummer and the other guitar player wanted to name it Scratch and Sniff, which I was opposed to. So eventually I changed the name after we were together for a year or so, because I just refused, because we finally got our first paying gig. I guess I was in 10th grade. And so I changed the name to Crown of Thorns, which later on, getting into hardcore punk and the New York hardcore scene, I found out that there was already a really good band called Crown of Thorns. But we spelled ours differently. And so that was my first real band, where we actually, like I said, we had a paying gig. We got paid $50 to play for 3 hours at a all-ages Christian venue underneath a gay bar in downtown Montgomery.
That's awesome.
And all of our church friends came to see us play.
Underneath the
It was
gay bar.
pretty interesting.
That's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
In Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah.
So you're from Texas, and then you moved to Montgomery. And did you spend all your high school years in Montgomery?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So that was 10th grade.
Yep.
Did you stay in that band throughout high school?
I was in that band for a couple of years, and then after that, I started my next serious band. That was pretty much, I had that for about 6 years. It was called PKD, and I had that until I moved up to Huntsville.
And when did you move up here?
2001.
2001. So obviously out of high school at that point and everything. So you've been in Huntsville for 20 years?
Yep.
20 years. Right on transplant.
Yep.
Texan to Huntsville. We have lots of transplants here. So what was your first band when you got to Huntsville?
Pain Factor.
Pain Factor.
Yep.
I can imagine that kind of music.
Yep. It was metalcore, I guess, is what you would call it at the time. It was kind of like mixture of, there was death metal elements and hardcore and classic metal stuff. The Toe was a website back then that pretty much all the local music community, from people like Michael Kilpatrick, to people in punk and metal bands, would get on there back when message boards were a thing.
Oh, wow.
And I pretty much got on there to try to, introduce myself to people around here and find band members. And so the first person I met was Chris Fanning. because he too was looking for band members, and so he started his first band, which was Severed Sanity, and then I got Pain Factor started, and then so we started playing shows together, and then the rest is history.
Well, let's talk about some venues from those days. Like when you were in Pain Factor and Chris was in, I'm sorry,
Severed Sanity.
Severed Sanity. Where did metal bands play in Huntsville, Alabama?
It was Tunes Karaoke, the Benchwarmer 2. Mm-hmm. It was on the other side of where there's like two sides of the Benchwarmer, and the first place we played back then was on the left side of the venue, and it was called Tunes Karaoke and Rock Room, and it was this tiny room. It was probably a little bigger than this space inside of the big Benchwarmer, and so the big part of the Benchwarmer was where they would have all the hip hop and the line dancing and all that different stuff they did, whatever was making money for the bar,
Right.
And so the little metal bands would play in this little room, and so that was when I first moved here. I came out there and I saw Spinecast and Gary Sanders, Standing Damage. Those were a couple of the first bands that I saw, and so that's where we were playing at the time. In fact, Lance Wright, who's the drummer in both Trace Locos and Forest Haven, came out to those Pain Factor shows back in the day. So it's kind of funny how it came full circle, because 20 years ago I was like, I'd really like for him to be our drummer, because he's one of the best around, and so it took me 20 years, and now he's the drummer in two of my bands. So
Awesome. Okay.
And then there was the hot spot, like we were talking about earlier, not the one that's open now in front of Shag Nasty's, but a little
one
bit
further down,
kind of like across, a little further past Chuck E. Cheese. And that was cool because, it was a bar, so they could make money, but it was also all ages. And
Yep. I said that's the first punk show I ever went to in Huntsville, Alabama, and it was in the back porch,
Yep.
and there was a volleyball court, and there were so many people on that porch. I was like, this sucker's gonna fall through. So tell me about
I've
Hotspot.
seen people fall through boards on that stage while they were playing. They actually had to pull a guy's leg out because he was stuck while he was playing. So I brought Dysrhythmia here. I think it was 2003, and they were on Relapse Records. Mm-hmm. I saw them in New Orleans with Mastodon, Bongzilla, and Burnt by the Sun. And then so like less than a year later, I brought them here because I started working through their booking agent through Relapse. And that's how I got Mastodon here a month later. But so I brought Dysrhythmia to the Hotspot, and their guarantee was $100. And I was blown away because I was like, but these guys are on Relapse Records. That's like a big metal label, And we made $80 off the door, so I had to go to an ATM and get $20 to cover the rest of their contractual obligation. And then they stayed at our house, and they were blown away that we let them take showers and use our towels, because apparently not a lot of people on their tours at the time would let them do that, so they would bring their own towels and stuff to wash with. It's like, well, I don't know if it's a Southern thing, but you can use our towels. It's okay, we'll wash them, And so that was kind of cool, getting to bring them here. And of course, I remember they were an instrumental band, ridiculously good. And there was some drunk guy in the bar that was obviously not there to see the bands. And he was, yeah, they're pretty good, but they ain't got no singer. I just threw my hands up. I don't know what to say about that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So that was cool. And then the Knights of Columbus on Lehman Ferry, that's pretty much the other place. That's where you could throw all ages shows. I think it was like $200 to rent it out, and then you had to provide your own security. So we would usually just get a friend that was really big and say he was security or an off-duty cop or whatever, and not pay them. Like we'll buy you beer after the show or give you pizza or something.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting, 'cause we had like Postal, Crashing Falcon, and a lot of those bands and death metal bands. So I would try to put these kind of like all-day festivals together, and I'd bring bands from Montgomery, and it's funny because one of the shows that I put together, I brought some bands from Montgomery and Birmingham, and then of course some local bands, and then one of them was from Knoxville. They were called Red Winter Dying, and they canceled because their band broke down or something. And fast forward many years later, I find out that was some of the guys from Whitechapel. That was their first band. So it's like, oh man, I almost had like some of the guys from Whitechapel here before they were, big deal,
Right. Before they were big famous. Nice.
And then, so I brought Mastodon here before they were winning Grammys. Their guarantee was $300. And that was a big deal. You know, it was on my birthday, so it was like 18 years ago. Yeah, because I turned 24 that day. And they sang Happy Birthday to me, which is one of the coolest things ever. I had Mastodon sing Happy Birthday to me. And it was kind of a train wreck of a show.
Oh boy.
Because there was a lot of kids in the parking lot drinking. And the Knights of Columbus people were not cool with that. So I was in charge of the show. So long story short, Pain Factor did not get to play because the cops were being called. And I said, Mastodon has to play or else this whole show was, you know, kind of for nothing. So all the other locals got to play, Mastodon played, and then they stayed with my friends. I had to go because I was in charge of it and they didn't want me to get arrested. I didn't do anything, but just the whole,
But there were
underage
kids
drinking and all that
and
stuff.
you're the person in charge. You're responsible.
So I had pictures of my friends and bandmates hanging out with Mastodon, not me. And so it was interesting. I went home, drank a lot of whiskey. You know, it's like it was a weird birthday. It was cool, but it was also, you know, disappointing. And then Troy from Mastodon called me back when I had a cell phone, and you know, checking up on me and seeing how I was doing. And so that was pretty cool. I tried to bring them back the next year, and their guarantee had gone up 3 times. And I was like, I can't afford that because this is, like we were talking about earlier, when you're promoting shows, it's coming out of you if you don't make you know, the door, and that's kind of part of why I stopped putting on shows, because as I got older, I was like, I can't really take on that responsibility. So I told him, I was like, I can't afford that because I don't, you know, last time we got just enough people in the door to pay their guarantee. We had like 60 or 80 kids or something that showed up. So it was a decent turnout, but looking back and you see who Mastodon is now, you're like, wow, there was 60 or 80 kids at, you know, Lincoln Ferry Road in Huntsville. But that's, you know, the realities of, you know, how that stuff starts out. So he ended up going, well, since you've been working with me with all these other bands, I'll change it. I'll let you bring them back for the same price. So I was like, awesome. And then the next month they signed to Warner. So that was the end of my contact with Mastodon.
So you've gotten to book some really great shows and bring some awesome music here to Huntsville. And now you perform with your several other bands. What places you play quite a bit in lots of different places. What upcoming shows do you have coming?
Trace Locos is playing next Friday and Saturday. Friday at Voodoo Lounge, Saturday at Lone Goose.
Awesome.
And the duo's playing Thursday on the 5th at Melt downtown.
Melt is nice.
And
That's
then
cute.
I think I'm playing a solo thing. I'm like busking downtown in front of Honest Coffee Roasters like at 8 a.m. on Friday.
Interesting.
So yeah.
8 a.m. on a Friday.
Play wherever.
Right on. Busking can actually be pretty, lucrative. Nowadays people look for it. Yeah.
A few times I've done it, it's been pretty good. So.
Okay. So let's see. We covered your bands up until when you first moved here. And then when did Trace Locos, Duos Locos, Forest Haven all come in? Were there bands between that timeline?
Yeah, there was. Well, Sciatica was kind of like the peak of my music career. 2004 to 2008, we had that. We got to go on tour a few times and got signed to a little indie label that turned out to be nothing. We were excited at the time. It was a big deal. Hey, we're getting signed, and they did nothing for us, but it made us look reputable,
Right.
So we got to travel, play Chicago a few times, which was very cool. And so we did that. And then after Sciatica dissolved, then there was a bunch of little short-lived bands like Hell Camino and the Yeager Brothers and John Wayne Whiskey Experiment. I played drums in that.
John Wayne Whiskey Experiment.
That was Joey from Ashay and Chris Fanning and maybe Nick that used to play with Joey in Diverge and Wolf Among Sheep, and I played drums, and it was like this. It was kind of like an MOD, SOD, like Tenacious D, comedic, satirical kind of band, but it was kind of like hardcore metal crossover kind
Sounds
of
really
music.
fun. I'm trying to remember if I saw it.
It was fun. It was funny.
God, it's funny how all the shows start to become one big
We
show.
wrote
here.
songs about Nicolas Cage and all kinds of just stupidness, and we drank a lot of whiskey.
Sounds fun.
Made really bad home videos. It was fun. You know, we just sat around drinking a lot back in those days, and we're like, we should start this little band, and I'll play drums and you play guitar, and you know, and so we did.
Great.
It lasted probably 6 or 7 years because we started it when I was in Sciatica and Joey was in Diverge, and we played a handful of shows. We actually went to Nashville and played in the Muse one time, and I think we played in Montgomery, and that was fun. And then I started doing the blues rock stuff, and the formations of Tres Locos was Rainmakers, and then it turned into Front Toward Enemy, and then there was a little break, and then I kind of reformed. I got one of the guys from both of those groups, from the previous group, and then Matt Collins, who was our first drummer, and it was originally Liquor Store Orphans because the bass player came up with that name, and then once we parted ways and Matt changed the name and it became Tres Locos, so that was about 7 or 8 years ago. And the duo started out of necessity to keep a gig when a drummer wasn't available, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah,
So,
makes sense.
you know,
Yep.
yeah.
And it still keeps the ties together.
Yep.
Duos, Locos,
So you have a gig and your drummer has an emergency come up, and you don't want to cancel a gig because, you know, especially if you're new and you haven't played there before, they don't know you, they may not book you again, you know.
Right.
So, we just started the duo kind of as a backup, and then the duo just sort of took on its own thing and became, we play more of those gigs than we do the band gigs, because obviously around here it's a lot easier to do, to get booked doing an acoustic act. So,
Right, and well, it's just more like overall acceptable.
Yeah.
It's easier.
it's easy for everybody.
It's easy. So, yeah, for everybody to hear, for everybody to listen to.
Yeah.
And then you have Forest Haven, which like we said is more of the metal part.
Yep.
And that's like, I interviewed you guys before on live. You guys can see that on the Facebook page. And it just seems like you guys have a lot of fun together.
We do.
Like you're a bunch of guys that have known each other for a long time, and we're like, we want to do this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. It's a good time. People
Yeah.
should come out and see it.
Yep, that was, with Lance, you know, he recorded the last Tres Locos album before he was in the band. And when we were working with him in the studio, he was, you know, talking about how he'd like to get a band going, do something like a blues band or something, you know. So that kind of stuck in my head. And then, so the Forest Haven thing with him came before he, you know, was in Tres Locos. And our bass player, Michael Klein from, you know, 5 O'Clock Charlie in Forest Haven, you know, he's been asking me to work on these different projects with him for a few years, and I never had the time. So finally made the time and figured I'd say, you want to start a metal band? And of course, having Casey and Duos and Trace and working with him, I know he's a great guitar player and a bass player, so, you know, he's very dependable. He'll play anywhere with anybody, you know. So he's a reliable musician and good guy. So Lance was the one that I wasn't sure, you know. Just you know, previously he was always in 7 bands at once and super busy, and this is the first time that I've known him and been around him where he wasn't. So, and then I got like kind of self-conscious and like, I don't know if he may be kind of up here and I'm there, you know. I don't know if he's gonna want to, you know, play with me, because he's, you know, coming from like the really technical death metal background with him, you know, he's played with some really ridiculous guitar players and, you know, doing all these world tours and stuff. So he was like, yeah, let's do it. So
Good.
it's been fun.
It is fun. So, is there anything that you want people, is there anything you want to talk about before we do the exit?
Just keep supporting local music. You know?
Keep supporting local music. We're so close to those 5 words. I was going to say, you have 5 words, something. Well, I think keep supporting local music is very important.
Support the local music venues.
Right. Keep supporting local music and their venue. Like, just go local stuff.
Yeah.
Just do all the local stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, because, you know, the bigger places, when a big shows announced in Huntsville. People come out of the woodworks and they're like, oh man, I'm not going to name names, but there's an artist that Trace Locos and Forest Haven covers, and we're huge fans, and we've been playing their music for years around here, because we'll play a song and nobody at any of these places we play at ever knows who it is. They're just kind of like, I don't know what this is. And I'm trying to this artist is huge in other places that play,
right.
arenas in front of 20,000 people, but in this market, it's, people are just like, I don't know what this is. And then they announce a big show at a big venue in Huntsville, and it's like hundreds of people like, oh, he's my favorite musician. And you should support local music, That's all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because these big venues, we're getting an amphitheater and all that stuff, so we're gonna have that. But still, the smaller venues, the corner coffee shops, just local everything. Because if it all becomes big like that, oh my. Yeah. And we're not gonna have our little corner private spaces anymore.
There's a lot of great musicians around here. Lots of great local music. I mean, just some of the best stuff that I think you'll ever hear. Playing on a Tuesday night in some dive in front of 5 people and nobody knows, but then, the big fancy music venue, we're going to pack that out. We're all going to go spend $100 on a ticket for that. And I'm like, that's cool, I get that, but you should also support the local stuff. Because there's lots, all these big famous people, they were once local nobodies, playing in dives, and there's still a lot of them out there that are every bit as good or better than people that are out there making lots of money doing it for a living. So
that is definitely something I'd like to see Huntsville support more local music. Just get out to local shows, get out and support local people. We now have that Huntsville music scene page. Go there. I mean, we had 40 listings this week. Like every week, there are so many things that are happening, and that's a place where at least it's all, and you can go and find everything. So I'm excited about that.
Yep, absolutely.
They were able to put together in like 2 days what people have been talking about doing for years. It blew me away a little bit. I'm excited to get to be a part of it. And hopefully all these people who are moving here from everywhere else, like, come and check out all the great stuff that Huntsville has to offer, because there are tons of great musicians here. Yes. All right, well, I think we covered it. Support local. Everybody, I'm Selena Brillo. This is Mike Slaten. Thank you for watching DIY Live.
Cool.